This crowd rises to its feet. Okoro slammed it home. Garland left wing, free ball. Perfect! Garland one of the lane, lobbed to Mobley. Pow! And Allen blocked the shot at the rim. Pow! With the left hand and a foul.
Welcome to the Chase Down Podcast, part of the Cavs Media family. I'm your host, Justin Rowan. The Chase Down is presented by Fubo TV. Watch over 100 channels of live sports and TV for half the cost of cable. There's no contract and no commitment. Try for free at FuboTV.com. We are continuing our off-season recap of the year that was with the Wings position group. But before we get into that, I got to introduce my co-host, Carter Rodriguez. Carter, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good, bud. Got dinner with a good buddy. Last night I was, I'll always enjoy a Celtics loss. Perhaps almost as much as any Cavalier win. So seeing them being sent home unceremoniously brought some warmth to this cold heart.
Yeah, it really did. I was feeling like I was about to be loud wrong on this here podcast for maybe, the 100th time in the last calendar year, where last podcast I was talking about how every top seed in the Eastern Conference has this bad loss. Their season is ending on a sour note. And for Boston to come all the way back, force a game 7, I got nervous. I got nervous that my take was going to age horribly, but really that's just about the most painful way to lose. I actually have a little bit of sympathy. Would you rather get swept or come back in that fashion and then lose that way at home in game 7?
I think the answer 3 months from now would be you'd rather have what the Celtics had.
Okay.
Immediately, maybe you'd rather get swept. I don't know. It was such a weird series because I was thinking about it, and it was if anyone's going to do it, it would be them, but 6 different times. If any 8 seed was ever going to go up 3-0 on a 2 seed in the conference finals, it would be the Heat. If any upper seed was going to mess around and get run out of the playoffs, it would be the Celtics. If any team was ever going to come back from 3-0, it was going to be a 2 seed going up against an 8 seed. If there's ever going to be a team that was not going to be deferred by a heartbreaking Game 6 loss at home, it would be the Heat. And it turned out the Heat's, if any team was going to, outweighed Boston's. They ended up taking the win. And man, they've just got to be the mentally toughest team I've seen in some time. It didn't even seem like it bothered them that much that they lost game 6. Yeah. I think anyone would have forgiven them for getting, for coming out flat in game 7, or maybe only surviving up to the first Boston run. But they just kind of play their game. They're even Steven, man. You can't take them out of what they do. And, there's
Jimmy Butler's a lunatic.
Yeah, and Spo is a lunatic too.
Yeah, that's true. That's a match made in heaven.
Yeah, and I just think there's so many lessons for the Cavs to take away from this Heat run, in terms of from the front office finding underappreciated or underutilized players and turning them into great players, creating a system from a coaching perspective that allows different players to thrive every night. Or for entire series that had previously never done so. It is for the players, a guy like Bam Adebayo as a role model for Evan Mobley, and for Mobley to watch his game kind of expand. There's just so many good lessons, I think, from this Heat team, for this Cavs team to learn. And also from a team building perspective, it is a bank on shooting talent. And even if it's not consistent, if you bank on it and you have a high variance stretch where you're hitting above your average, you can make an NBA Finals run.
Yeah, it's funny because they weren't a good shooting team throughout the year, but so many of their guys for their career were better shooters than the numbers. And I guess that's one of the advantages of when you do have a good defense, you can kind of have that high baseline. And I guess we saw the opposite of that with the Cavs, right? Where the defense kept them in that series with the Knicks, but the shooting just wasn't there for them. And I guess that to some extent that's the modern NBA. But on the other hand, they had more options to go to, right? And like Kevin Love didn't play in this. I did love Kevin victory lapping over every single season he's been in the playoffs. He's made the NBA Finals. I like that. I
33% playoff appearance rate, but never mind that.
I did enjoy that. Before we get into the Cavs Wings, Carter, I do want to touch on a couple other updates at the top of the Eastern Conference. Nick Nurse to Philly. I like to see the concentration of
hate.
all of my basketball gripes in one spot of Nick Nurse, Daryl Morey, Joel Embiid, and possibly James Harden. That it just makes it simpler from a scheduling standpoint.
It does the body and heart good to only have to deal with it a few times a year instead of like 8 times.
I also I liked the hiring of Adrian Griffin for the Bucks. I thought, even though there were a lot of coaches on the market with championship experience, you look at kind of how the vibes were around those teams, the complaints about not making adjustments, rotations, and all that. I kind of like going the new blood route. So I
still wouldn't have fired. I still wouldn't have fired Bud, but that's me, and we don't need to relitigate that right now.
Yeah, and I mean, I had the tweet from the 2020 playoff run or 2021 title win where I said, even if they win the championship, I'd fire Bud, which is basically the only time I've weighed in on a coaching debate like that. But it was a little tongue in cheek. But Carter, before we get into the position groups, I've been dying to talk about the mail. I need to talk about my Winnipeg Sea Bears. And what I ask is that you grant me 60 seconds of Sea Bears, Carter. I feel like that's fair. It is the off season. We are starved for content. We don't have a first round pick. I demand 60 seconds of Sea Bears talk. Will you grant it to me?
Justin, I would grant you an hour, but I know that what we want isn't necessarily what the listeners want. But yes, I will I will throw 60 seconds on the clock, and Justin, your time starts now.
The Sea Bears kicked off their inaugural season with the largest crowd in CEBL history at a sold-out Canada Life Center. Glenn Yang hit the first basket in franchise history. A deep three off a deflected dribble to beat the shot clock. Splashy signing Teddy Allen didn't live up to the Teddy Buckets nickname, shooting 4 of 23 to get his 13 points on the night. But it was made up for by my MVP on the night. EJ Anosike, the man who spent last year in the G League for Texas and Salt Lake City, put up 21 points, 11 rebounds, and was the clear-cut most composed player on the court, along with 22 points from Jelani Watson-Gale off the bench. But we can't have a Sea Bears segment without shouting out the Winnipeg boys. U-Sport Rookie of the Year Simon Hildebrand shook off some first-half jitters in front of his home crowd and finished with 13 points off the bench and showed some impressive body control attacking the rim. And finally, hometown hero Chad Posthumus overcame foul trouble by getting the game-winning putback to secure the 90-85 Elam-ending win. Sea Bears beat the Vancouver Bandits.
Justin, you got it all in with time to spare. How about that? I am so proud of you. Heck of a Sea Bear Sunday update on a Tuesday. I think we're still going to call it Sea Bear Sundays, even though we almost never record on Sundays. I just like the vibe. And you can have a minute of Sea Bear talk whenever you want. Now, Justin, I haven't watched yet, but it does look like there is a streaming option. And I think I'm going to have to purchase in solidarity.
There is free streaming.
Oh, my gosh.
Even better. Free online streaming.
My gosh.
Make it accessible. It's for the children. I gotta say, Carter, the first time really experiencing in person like a well thought out Elam ending, I loved it. So the way that they do it is the first stoppage under 4 minutes in the fourth quarter. They add 9 points to whoever's in the lead, and that becomes the target score.
Sure.
So Winnipeg was up 80-67. Normally, you know, under 4 minutes, no problem at all. They blow that lead. It is 85 all. I am stressed out as hell. Winnipeg hits a 3, put back for the win. I loved it. I really like going.
Now, where
out
were the
and,
seats? Where were the seats, Justin?
It's right in line with the free throw line. I'm always looking at that Winnipeg bench or that Winnipeg basket. So any game winner, I'm going to see that. Love that. But I like the Elam ending. It's FIBA rules, so they allow a little more physicality too. I thought it was a lot of fun. And I also got to give out a shout out, Carter. Listener and fan of the pod, Jeff, who came up to me after the game, season ticket holder right by me, and said that he is a massive Cavs fan and listens to the pod and actually recognized me, which blew my mind.
There are 100% more Cavs fans in Winnipeg than I thought there were.
I think it might just be us too, and like that was just the universe giving me that moment. That made my entire day, so I needed to shout him out because that really was a lot of fun. Yeah, I've seen our Winnipeg download numbers, Carter. They're not great.
Go Sea Bears, man. And I love the merch. You know, if there's any road to me ordering some, I'm certainly going to do so.
All right.
Yeah, if you were really a friend, you'd send me some, but it's fine. It's fine.
I'm collecting my own right now, Carter. I'm not made of money here.
Yeah,
but
I understand. I would PayPal you. Come on. Anyway. This is not what people are here for, even though I would highly recommend some folks check out the next Sea Bears game. It's going to be a fun season, and we're certainly going to do it whether you like it or not on the Chase Down podcast.
Well, here's the thing, Carter. Like, I'm a man that consumes way too many basketball podcasts, and so many of them are self-indulgent. You have like the 30 minutes of banter before any of the basketball talk starts. I think a minute's okay. I think a self-indulgent
What
minute.
about 5 minutes after the minute? Because that's what we just did.
No, that's separate. That's talking about Elam ending. That's something the NBA is experimenting with. I can justify that. Carter.
Yeah. I love it.
Let's just get into it. Let's just get into the wings.
I love our Bears, but let's jump right into our Cavaliers.
All right. So we're going to start things off. Position group for the wings. I arbitrarily kind of picked this to be Caris LeVert, Isaac Okoro, Cedi Osman, Lamar Stevens, Danny Green. Dean Wade, I think you could make an argument could be included in this group, but we're doing 3 episodes and I wanted to stretch him out and put him with the bigs. So
I would have put Lamar with the bigs, but I think you're probably right to put him with the wings.
I was going to, but it turned out that 67% of his minutes came at either shooting guard or small forward.
Listen, you guard as many point guards as Lamar guarded this season. You're a wing, buddy.
There you go. So I want to kick things off with what went well this season, and I would say one of the more divisive players between you and I has been Caris LeVert. I really enjoyed the season. I think he got a lot better after the trade deadline, after the pressure of kind of having his name and all those rumors was removed from him. But overall, I thought it was a great season and what you would want from Caris LeVert realistically. His three-point shooting numbers were strong across the board. 39.2% on the year. He shot 38.9% on pull-ups, 39.3% on catch and shoot, 38.7% above the break, 41.3% from the corner. And Basketball Index has this handy number for how your openness rating on 3-point attempts. Only 34th percentile for openness rating. And I think a lot of that comes of those contested pull-ups that he took. But this was one of those areas that he really worked on in the offseason, and it really paid dividends.
Yeah. He really shot the ball quite well, all told. He still went through stretches of inconsistency. I still don't think he's a crazy gravity player, but more often than not, he was a good enough shooter out there. And if anything, he should have taken maybe some more from a volume perspective. So yes, I absolutely think the jumper from 3, very specifically, and we'll talk about what didn't go so well later. But in terms of, I do feel like he was a guy that when he was taking them with confidence, it felt good. And there weren't a lot of wings who you could really say that about consistently, or that you weren't holding your breath a little bit. And he had games where he caught fire from three and won them games. So I thought that was certainly a strength. And obviously your next note, I think his playmaking was quite good, especially the first half of the year with no Ricky Rubio. I think part of the reason they weathered that so well alongside some strong minutes from Howell Neto is that Caris did a really nice job as a primary pick and roll ball handler.
Yeah, he really did. And that was one of the things that we talked about before the season was how much of a need is a backup point guard, because you did have strong playmaking numbers or secondary playmaking numbers from Caris LeVert as well as at the time Colin Sexton. So I thought that the playmaking was really good. He made a lot of passes to Jared Allen and Evan Mobley that really kind of jump out. I still think kind of his playmaking, he doesn't see the entire court. Like, I don't think you see him running a pick and roll and then spraying it to the far corner or anything like that. But I think what you want from a secondary playmaker, you get from Caris LeVert. I also thought his defense was strong. Again, this is something that's subjective, but the metrics that we do have are positive. He was 86th percentile in defensive EPM. And again, using Basketball Index, which a great site, you guys should support it. 89th percentile for on-ball perimeter defense, which I think matches the eye test. I think sometimes he was a little overeager. We can certainly point at instances where he fouled three-point shooters and kind of possessions on the perimeter that you like to have back. But I think it was all in the service of trying to play hard, and I thought his defense overall was really good. I think for what you wanted from Caris LeVert, this was a pretty damn good season for him, even though, as you said, there were some rough patches in there.
I think certainly it was solid. This is a spot where we are going to disagree a little bit. But before I disagree, and we have plenty of room to talk about where we want to see improvement, where I can kind of levy some of my concerns. He was very good on ball. This season, especially on ball, in my opinion. I think off ball, more to quibble with still. But on ball, I thought he was the second most capable perimeter defender on the team. In terms of, at least especially against guards. I thought he did as good as Okoro, really, over the course of the Knicks series. On Brunson, maybe not quite as well, but like he certainly held his own. It was not a layup line. He shut off angles. He played more physically than I've seen him play.
He was especially good in that game too.
Yeah, and I think in terms of just noting what went well in a playoff series that went so wrong, I thought Caris was okay. Like I think especially as a scorer. In that Knicks series, he averaged 15, 5 and 3, 43% from the field, 36 from 3 in the series. Not great, but like just a lot better than everyone else, and that kind of matters.
Is it fair to say that if you were going into that series and I told you that line, you would be happy with it because you were assuming you were getting more from the core four?
Yes, I think that would be the way I would say it. I think there's plenty to quibble with, even with this postseason run. I don't want to just like give carte blanche praise because I don't think he was awesome in the postseason, but I thought he was good enough to be the team's fifth or sixth man. And the lineup data mostly bore that out, that when those five were on the floor together, the core four plus Caris, they were okay against the Knicks. It was every other minute that wasn't so okay. So, I still think he was overtaxed. He played 34 minutes a game in the postseason. I really do think he's more of a 25, 26 minute a game postseason player for kind of max Caris output. But 13 assists to only 5 turnovers in the series. I think even 15, 5 and 3 in that series goes a pretty darn long way. And he helped them win a game. He helped them win their only win in the postseason. So, as a staunch Caris criticizer, and someone who's always been concerned about the fit, I think he needs to get some love for his postseason play.
Definitely agree there. Moving on, Cedi Osman. Kind of the notes that I had that what I enjoyed from Cedi's season. Thought he moved well off ball and he was a willing shooter. I think that's one of the biggest things that he brings to the lineup. You look at the early season lineup data, and I think that was a big part of why those lineups were so successful. The Cavs need shooting. They have a lot of talented players, and Cedi just kind of made sense as that fifth guy. I thought he had nice moments against the Knicks as well. There were moments that didn't go as well, but again, that kind of goes back to maybe being asked to do a little more than he should. And I also think that it's worth noting that he improved his finishing at the rim this season. Last year, he was at 61% and went up to 66%. I think to start the year, it was even better, and he had a little bit of a lull in the middle of the year. But I thought overall, Cedi had a pretty solid year. What kind of stood out to you as his strengths this season?
He continued in his role as the Cavaliers' accelerant in the regular season. He was the cause of many a Cavalanche this season. He was the plus-minus god that could be that high-variance player that sparked big runs. I thought I think he had his best season as a scorer. Per 36, he didn't have a career high in per 36, but from an efficiency standpoint, he shot 37% from three on 7 threes per 36, 45% overall. So career best from 2-point and 3-point percentages, without a crazy drop off in his other stats. I thought he really is a guy who, the more you need from him, the worse he looks, in terms of but when he gets to just thrive in the cracks in the empty spaces and be his chaotic self, he really does his best. And the Cavs were more talented this year at the top, and that allowed Cedi to look really, really good in the regular season. So I think that's where I just kind of, put a button on the Cedi discussion and just saying, like, he did what he did last year, but even better at his best.
Yeah, and I think some of that, what we were hoping for was there's probably going to be more playmaking this season, right? That you have Donovan Mitchell out there. You might not see that post Ricky Rubio drop off that he had the prior year, and I think for the most part that basically bore out. It was really just kind of that January lull where Kevin Love wasn't playing well, Cedi wasn't playing well, and just that was the worst month, right? Like that was the month where the Cavs won 500. Eventually they switched to Okoro being in the starting lineup, and things turned around from that point. That was basically the end of Kevin Love playing as well for this team, which I guess ties in nicely to Isaac Okoro, who I think the biggest improvements that I saw from him this year was I thought he was more impactful as a defender, and really kind of blossomed into being more of an event defender rather than someone that's, just kind of in position doing his job, which you really need to be in today's NBA because the offensive talent is so high and the rules are in such a way that simply just contesting the shots isn't going to really cut it. When you're a defender, you need to get into guys, you need to disrupt their rhythm, you need to generate those steals, you need to generate those blocks. And I thought he did a great job of that. His steal percentage went up to the 70th percentile from 48th the prior year. 60th percentile in block percentage, up from 29th. That's a massive jump. And then utilizing, again, those B-ball index stats, on-ball defense, he was in the 88th percentile. And screen navigation, 94th percentile, which all matches the eye test. This is a guy that sticks to his man, navigates screens very intelligently. And obviously, the remade jump shot got a lot of the conversation going into this year. Started off 0 of 12 from 3, but after that point, shot 39% from 3. So again, the volume's low. We'll get into that when we'd like to see improvement. But is there anything that I didn't touch on, Carter, that kind of stood out to you that you liked from Okoro this year?
Yeah, it was nice to see his shooting splits kind of improve everywhere. At the rim, last year he was 65%. This year he was 68.5%. From the 3 to 10 feet range, where he didn't take a ton of shots, to be clear. He went from 26% to 43%. And then from 3 went to 35, from 35 to 36. And it didn't feel like a year where all of his percentages got better. But they did. Even though he shot a greater percentage of his shots from three, his field goal percentage still went up. 1.4 points. And I think to your point on the defensive end, he is starting to become a bigger event defender. I think some of that came at the cost of fouling. He fouled 3.5 times per 36. And that got him in some hot water. I think he had a rough whistle this year, a wholesale.
That's fair. Yeah, I completely agree with it. I thought he got a flat out terrible whistle to be honest. But again, I'm a big old homer.
Yeah. It's kind of wild. I just was looking at his basketball reference page. He's averaged 10.7 points per 36 all 3 years.
I know.
That's crazy.
It's really incredible.
That's crazy. But his efficiency went up. So, there is, I think there is probably a class of people who would say Isaac has not gotten better on the offensive end of the ball. And I've certainly have criticized him for not getting better enough on the offensive end of the ball. But his rookie year, he shot 42% from the field and 29% from three. Those are enormous jumps. That's 7.4 percentage points better from the field, and 7
give me
better
the
from
field
three.
goal percentage and 3-point percentage, because I don't think we've said it on yet.
49.4 from the field this season, and 36 from three. So those are meaningful jumps from his rookie year. Now, obviously, his shot diet is much better than in terms of he's got a lot more help, so they should be better. But I do think you're seeing small dividends. It's just a matter of, are those dividends enough to continue, investing in him at that spot?
Yeah, and when the volume's that low, to again kind of play devil's advocate there, when the volume's that low, swings in percentages can occur, right? I think the consensus on 3-point shots normalizing is 700 attempts. It's going to take them a while to get up to those numbers, right? And we've seen years from guys like Jay Crowder the year before he came over to the Cavs, where he had that outlier year of shooting from three, and sometimes that happens, right? So everything about Okoro has always kind of centered around, can he up that volume, right? And I think before we move on from him, the other thing I'd like to point out is I do think he got better at moving off ball. I thought they started to use him more as a screener. He was starting to be more active, not just standing in the corner. I still think that's a major area of growth, and we'll get into that shortly. But I do think that there was some growth in that area as well.
Absolutely. Let's move on to Lamar, who had a weird season, I would say. Because he kind of, in my opinion, he kind of functioned as JB's well, at least I know what Lamar is going to give me guy. He is I think, from the outside looking in, it seems like he's a coaching staff favorite. His time in the starting lineup coincided with a lot of wins. So he does get credit for that, even if the lineup data didn't show that the starting lineup was functioning that well with him at the three. But I know that you wanted to talk about him as a power forward, because I really, even though he's in the wing group, I thought I will agree with you that his best minutes were at the four this year.
Yeah, it kind of is a funny inclusion, and you're right. Lamar was the guy where when the intensity didn't seem to be at the level that it needed to be, he was put in, which is kind of funny, because I do agree with your assessment, but then you look at the start of the year, and he didn't play to start the year. He wasn't in the initial rotation coming out of camp. It really was that stretch where they were in a bit of a funk. They were looking for some life.
Isaac was lost.
Caris had asked JB to come off the bench. He thought that was the best way he could contribute. So Lamar was the option that they went to. And eventually Isaac did find his groove and took that starting spot and played well within it. But Lamar did give them some life. As you said, even though that lineup data wasn't great with the five of them, he still helped kind of breathe some life into the lineup. And he really did find his niche. And I think the biggest takeaway is he did play well as a power forward. I think that's when you can get him the ball moving downhill. He moves well in those instances. He has those couple kind of quick post moves. turnaround mid-range jumpers, that kind of thing that he can really get to in those spots. And actually, he kind of played well as a big two in some instances too, where they'd use him as a screener. Although I don't think that's the best use of him defensively. But his lineup data at power forward, that was easily the best, because at small forward is break even. At shooting guard in brief minutes, I think 17% of his minutes, it was about +3, but it's +6.9 with him at power forward, which was 33% of his total minutes. I thought that was kind of the best usage of him. He's a guy that, depending on what the Cavs do this offseason, I would kind of anticipate, if he's still on the roster, that it would be similar to last year, where I don't think he would be in the initial starting lineup or in the starting rotation, I should say. But I do think, as a kind of break glass in case of emergency, I thought they found a little bit of something with him at power forward.
Yeah, I would agree. Let's move on to Danny Green, who I don't think we have to spend much time because he didn't play much.
The only note I have is he still has a shooting touch.
Can shoot.
That's it.
He can still shoot, and he still thinks the game at an unbelievably high level. He relocates better than any other Cavalier wing. And that just comes from being a really, really smart and one of the best vet wings of his generation. He just knows basketball better than any of these dudes. He just does. And I think he still showed that. Should we move?
And let's just knock out area for improvement. So he's a free agent. We don't know if he's back, but if he is back with the Cavs, I just have improved mobility, so it's easier to keep him on the court. A little more removed from that injury. As you said, I think the IQ's there. I think the shooting's there. If he were to return to the Cavs, I just want to see him move a little bit better, so it's easier to keep him on the court.
Yeah,
I have no other notes.
Yeah, he didn't move super well. I think everyone knew it. It's hard coming back from catastrophic knee injury when you're 35. So, very much hoping that if he is back with the team next year, that he gets that he's looking and feeling really good in that knee. And but yeah, I still have quite the soft spot for Danny Green. He's one of my favorite role players ever.
Yeah, he's awesome. I think we touched on that when he signed. We're both big fans of him. Let's knock out the other kind of quick area for improvement, because I do want to kind of get into it with LeVert, Okoro, and Cedi. Lamar, the rebounding needs to improve. If he's going to be a small ball power forward for the Cavs, he needs to get better as a rebounder. I'm not saying he's necessarily a bad rebounder, but the lineup data was awful in terms of offensive rebounds given up. It's amazing that they were plus 6.9 in those minutes per cleaning the glass, when opponents were rebounding 33.6% of their misses with him at power forward, Carter, on the year. Like, that's over a third of missed shots resulted in an offensive rebound with Lamar at power forward. And I guess, that goes to show kind of the second effort from the Cavs defense to rally after giving up those rebounds. But I do think if he's going to get minutes, if he's still on the roster next year, that would be an area of growth, just to kind of get more juice out of those small ball 4 minutes from him.
Couldn't agree more. In general, I just kind of feel like this is almost a Kobe Altman front office note of, like, I just think right now I think last season they just asked too much of Lamar. He really is kind of their break glass in case of emergency first choice right now. If someone gets hurt and then all of a sudden he's starting games, like, I just feel like he gets.
Which is funny because that was Wade. That was Wade last year, and then Wade had his injury too, right? So
and they needed him more because they traded three rotation players for one. But like, I just feel like it was asking a lot of him to go be that guy for them, to be a starter for them this season. I think that kind of reflects on where their depth was and where the rest of the players around those minutes were playing. I just think, like, he was probably a spot or two in the rotation too high for my liking. But not because I thought there was amazing options that should have been getting those minutes. So, I think that, some more competition for him would be wise. I do want to stay on the rebounding note for Isaac.
That's interesting.
Because listen, I understand he's not going to have gravity on offense right now, and maybe not ever. People still ignore PJ Tucker, and he's turned himself into a pretty darn good 3-point shooter in the corner. But if you're going to be a low volume offensive player that hangs his hat on, ISO defense, on ball defense, you got to bring other stuff to the court more consistently. And as much as, we've argued in the Discord about his role and his role within the offense and how sometimes that can limit him. You know what is not capped by his role or anything? It's his rebounding, man. He averaged per 36. He averaged 4.1 rebounds, playing almost primarily small forward.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can't be like at the 3, and like that's part of the reason why the Cavs defensive rebounding isn't where it is, because they're not getting a lot of rebounding help anywhere other than Mobley or Allen right now. Because Wade is not a particularly good rebounder. Stevens is not a particularly good rebounder. Okoro, I would say, is below average.
Yeah.
And
the funny
you
thing
just
is,
can't be, being as athletic as he is, as strong as he is, with good instincts. And I know you're not get as many defensive rebounds when you're guarding the guy on the other side. Like, there is a probably a pretty direct correlation there. But even on the offensive boards, only one a game. Like, I'm not seeing it. I want him to be he's strong enough and athletic enough to be chaotic and annoying. Why can't he be? Josh Hart doesn't have a hard time grabbing rebounds.
You already took it from me. You took it from me.
He doesn't have a hard time grabbing rebounds while guarding Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah, and he's shorter than Okoro, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's only 6'4". And really, that's the biggest difference, because Josh Hart at times he has been 3-point shooter, low volume, very similar kind of offensive output. The biggest difference is kind of those hustle plays. And Okoro, it jumps out. Like, sometimes he does get incredibly impressive offensive rebounds, and you're like, I want more of that, right? Like, do you think to some extent it's a team mentality thing where they need to be more aware of it, and that's something that they can take away from the next season, where there was just kind of an assumption that, hey, we have Jared Allen, we have Evan Mobley out there, we don't need to kind of team rebound at the same level because we have 2 7-footers. Do you think that might be part of it here, or is this just kind of individual skill sets and not something that's going to change unless personnel changes?
If it is philosophical, I sure hope it changes, because their philosophy gave them the worst defensive rebounding team after the All-Star break, and the by a country mile worst defensive rebounding team in the postseason.
I completely agree with you. I think this is a really smart point.
I'm not gonna ask Isaac to be something he's not. Like, I don't think it's fair. Like, I'm not like, why aren't you running pick and roll? Because I don't really know if that's part of who he's gonna be. But like, if you're gonna be a low usage offensive guy from a shooting perspective, I just gotta notice you, and you can choose to be noticed. Yeah. And I just feel like he is too capable of fading into the background. Like, I want to say it's game 4 against the Knicks where Isaac was a little out of control, but in a way that was kind of fun. Like, I kind of liked it, even though I was like, okay, reel it back a little bit, buddy. But like, he came in and was like a breath of energy. Like, he brought that Cedi Osman chaos. And
that's what I want to see.
And he's got a body and an athletic profile that should allow him to thrive being a chaos generator. And he just hasn't been that so far in his career.
And honestly, I think he has good rebounding instincts, because when he is moving around and he's, not behind the 3-point arc, I think he crashes in and gets some really contested rebounds. Like, he got some offensive rebounds that were noteworthy against the Knicks. And I think it all kind of ties into, even though his off-ball movement has improved, I think he needs to be more consistently active. I think that's one of our big takeaways, right? Like, just how we say he became more of an event defender. He's generating blocks, he's generating steals. Generate those second chance opportunities. Be that guy that's forcing the defense to account for you, because if you're moving around and you're looking to crash the offensive rebounds, you are going to have gravity as a result of that too. So I think you're right. I think him being a more active player would really help him because he is a smart finisher around the rim. He is a good cutter. And when you're dealing with passers, when you're dealing with NBA players that have good vision, their eyes see movement. If you're looking like you're moving with a purpose and you're getting into those passing lanes, guys are going to find you. And I think that is where I'd really like to see some growth, because even though the 3-point shooting improved, again, the volume is very low. We talked about how Caris's openness rating on Basketball Index was 34%, 34th percentile, which, is low. For Isaac, it was the 100th percentile. Nobody was more open than him, and he was only 58th percentile in catch and shoot threes, which was 36 points.
Volume was in the upper 50th percentile either.
Right. So that it's an area of an improvement. I feel better about his jump shot. I think the form has improved. I think he did take some contested looks. I think the willingness to shoot was better, but he's going to need to improve in these other areas. And I think that's how you start to get more juice out of him overall, because as much as I'd like to see him more involved in the offense, and we've had our disagreements about that as well, or how you can use him, I should say, I do think that the ways, like there's only so many possessions. There's so much talent at the top end of this roster. There's only so much possessions, and being that guy that is a chaos generator, that generates these extra opportunities, that's the small forward Tristan Thompson, as I called them in the past. That's what you want from Isaac Okoro, and that's where I think the biggest area of improvement is for him.
I completely agree. Let's move on to Cedi.
Okay. You want to go first?
Yeah, I would go first, and and you're gonna hear me loud and clear on this one, Justin, because we're on one of the best video conferencing softwares out there. Support for this podcast and the following message come from Zoom. 500,000 businesses connect using Zoom, a single platform for phone, chat, workspaces, events, apps, and video. Zoom enables real-time collaboration for teams around the globe. Zoom, how the world connects. I thought we were going to forget it. Cedi,
I was 100% going to forget it. Like I put my head in my hands because, one, you stole it from me. Two, I was kicking myself because I 100% forgot.
Yeah, we were at the 40-minute mark, and I was like, uh-oh. Anyway, Cedi, this is a hard criticism because it's hard for him to address. I just still feel like on a possession to possession basis, he does not think the game at a high enough level right now. At the highest levels that you need. In terms of spacing out off ball on defense, in terms of, I praise Danny Green's relocation skills. I'm going to criticize Cedi's. There were a lot of really good threads during that Knicks series of plays where Cedi is guarded in a corner, but if all he does is slide up 5 feet to the wing, he's wide open for a three, and like you just don't get away with not being super savvy in the postseason. There's a reason I'm so biased towards all these basketball geniuses that just read the game at the highest level, and I index on that much more than I index on skill set and toolkit, is because of stuff like that. It's so hard to teach that, and I just feel like writ large, he still has to get better at reading the small intricacies of the game. There's plenty to quibble with from a skill set possession standpoint, but I still think it's just that macro, like, are you making 80% of the right decision but not getting all the way to 100? I still think that's Cedi's problem.
I'm glad I heard you out, because my knee jerk when you first said that about thinking the game was to disagree, because I actually thought his decision making on fast breaks and some of the half court sets even was better than it was the previous year. But I do think in terms of the points you raised about relocation, finding those passing lanes, I think that there's really something to that. Again, going back to this openness rating, 87th percentile. And he's a good shooter, right? Like, he's a movement shooter. He's someone that you would think would have some gravity. But overall, 87th percentile in openness rating, but 61st percentile in catch and shoot threes, right? Like, he's getting great looks and he's hitting enough of them. But I do think you're right. And maybe this gets back to even what we were saying about Okoro, which is better off ball movement, finding those spots on the court can manipulate the defense. And I think Caris's activity, and it's certainly some of it's, playing on ball more, that's going to generate more attention from the defense. But I just think his activity overall generates more attention from the defense than either of these guys, even though they shoot a decent percentage. So I think you're right to point that out. And obviously defense is always going to be the number one thing when you talk about where you'd like to see improvement from Cedi. Out of the top 10 in minutes played, he had the worst defensive EPM on the team, was in the 51st percentile, sometimes gets lost off ball. And I think when you see inconsistent minutes from him, it's usually generated from, extended rough play on the defensive end. I thought he had some moments. I thought, he can dig in, he can make a defensive play, he can go out and get a chase down block. He's got some tools. It's funny looking back at the analysis of him coming over to the NBA. It was, this is a defense first guy that might be able to add a three, and that hasn't been how it's shaken out. But yeah, that's obviously the biggest area of growth.
I'm starting to think we're not scouts, Justin.
That wasn't us. That wasn't us. We aggregate scouts.
Yeah, we just aggregate scouts. We aggregated the wrong ones. Either way, I think that you're right. The defense is there. And then regarding the shooting, I just think if the Cavs are able to add a bona fide capital S shooter at the wing this offseason, you'll feel the difference between we thought Cedi was like this accelerant to runs by bombing away from three. We didn't even realize what you could have if you get a real volume shooter that really can hit at a high volume, a high percentile with the open shots that everyone else on this team gets them. That's the way
honestly,
I feel.
Even the glimpses we got of Danny Green when he started playing at the end of the year, he could barely move out there, and he was still just knocking down and taking kind of crazy threes, and just that kind of quick trigger presence is something that they haven't had.
Cedi's the closest thing we've had to that in a role player in the past couple years. But a guy like Max Strus or someone like that, I think you'll really feel that difference if someone like that joins the roster, because
and I don't think he's even a capital S shooter, but I think
I do. I think if you can hit 48% from any part of the 3-point arc, you're a capital S shooter.
I'm not all the way there, but he's still top of my my wish list for free agents. But I always kind of reserve that for kind of like a JR or Corver or a Danny Green.
Sure. But those are some of the best shooters in the history of the league.
Yeah, they're not, and there's no free agents that match that kind of pedigree. So moving on, Caris LeVert. I would like to see him kind of maintain that post-deadline assertiveness. I thought there were times where he deferred a little too much, and it took out his rhythm as a scorer. He needs touches. He needs to be active, and if he is just playing kind of that 25 to 28 minute per night role that you were talking about earlier, Carter, I think you want to maximize the ball handling he has in those minutes. I think you want to see if he has it on a given game, and if you're getting kind of one of those nuclear Caris nights. I'd also like to see him get to the rim a little more, because I thought he relied a little bit too much on the in-between game, and maybe some of this has to do with the spacing with the Cavs. But I thought post-deadline he attacked the rim more than he had earlier in the season. He improved his season-long rim numbers, which the first half of the year was awful. He's going up and dunking on guys, which was surprising to see. I think that he is someone, especially if there is improved spacing, which we obviously hope for next year. I think he's someone that can kind of put some pressure on the rim. He can get to the free throw line, and I would like to see that aspect of his game grow. But for the most part, when you're talking about a Caris LeVert or a Cedi Osman, these are guys later on in their careers. You're not going to see massive changes. So I think those are kind of things kind of in the margins that can make a difference without asking them to be someone different than who they are.
I just feel like you have to talk talk about how bad the mid-range shooting was. From 3 to 10 feet, he was 37%. The year prior with Indy, the year prior he was 44. From 10 to 16 feet, he was 30%. From 16 feet to the 3-point arc, he was 24%. I mean, he was on balance. Probably, I don't have the percentiles in front of me. Volume to efficiency. On balance, he was probably the worst mid-range player in the league from a shooting perspective, in terms of as a player who actually shot shots from there consistently on a team that was trying to win games. It was
dunks and threes has him 11th percentile, 32.3% for mid-range. Only player on the team that was worse was Cedi at 29%.
Yeah, I mean, just a disaster. Because this is a team that needs that. they need late shot clock shot generation, and he was horrible at it. And I don't even know what to say other than I hope it gets better, and the numbers suggest it will get better. I
think you would be justified questioning if the 3-point numbers are going to regress a little bit, but I think it's safe to say that the mid-range is also due for regression and should improve. I think he should get credit too for putting in a lot of work on his body, right? Like, he came into the season saying, I worked all off season on trying to stay healthy and improving my 3-point shot. And he stayed healthy and he improved his 3-point shot. So maybe, it's an adjustment to the role or whatever the case may be. But you just have to imagine that the mid-range is better. Carter, do you want to guess who the best mid-range shooter was on the team by percentage last year?
By percentage, not including volume or anything like that?
Not even factoring volume at all. Not even a little bit.
I'm going to just say Darius.
Rolo, baby.
Oh man, I knew it was going to be silly. Yeah. So I thought, the shooting is obvious. I think Caris would probably tell you that his mid-range game was very bad this year. And just for whatever reason, the touch was just not there. I mean, he had more rim out than seems possible. So I'm really hoping for just a straight up progression. I don't even think. I doubt that Caris wasn't working on his mid-range game all year. I'm not gonna be like one of those idiots that's like, get in the gym, work on that. Because I know he does.
Shoot 1,000 free throws if you miss 2 in a row.
Yeah. So I'm just hoping for some regression there to even slightly below average would be nice. Because that was bad. And then just on the defensive end. I feel very obligated to continue to bang the gang rebounding drum. There were so many plays where Josh Hart or Quentin Grimes or RJ Barrett just snaked in behind him while he ball watched as a shot went up and got a board. And the reality is, just like Isaac, you're not going to be able to play the full-time 3, averaging 4 to 4.5 rebounds per 36.
Yeah.
They have to rebound the ball.
That used to be my favorite thing in the playoffs was out rebounding teams. Just like the Cavs had such a devastating offense, and it was so fun that a few times they'd miss, Tristan would go out and get a second chance opportunities. And that's, as much as I want shooting, I do want to kind of get back to that identity, because the Cavs defense is so good that if they're ending possessions, if they're not giving up second chance opportunities at the rate that they did, this is easily going to be the best defense in the league, assuming that you improve that kind of personnel. So I do think that there is kind of internal changes, and you're correct in highlighting that guys like Okoro and LeVert can have a role in improving that without even making roster changes.
Yeah, I mean, you look at a guy like Caleb Martin, who obviously, I don't think you go into this offseason or any player expecting saying we're gonna get Caleb Martin or we're gonna find our Caleb Martin, who averaged 9 points in the regular season and then averages 20 in the Eastern Conference Finals. Obviously, you're not gonna find that. But over the last 2 games, he grabbed 15 boards and then 10 boards.
Yeah.
playing on the wing exclusively. Like the Cavs didn't have any players who would go get them 10 boards other than Jarrett or Evan pretty much all year. Sometimes Donnie would get up there. And I think more than anything, they need to have a I hope that this offseason is a collective come to Jesus for that roster to say, hey, if we're going to have a team that's small that requires us that we think we need to send extra help in shade, strong side at the rim because we're small on the perimeter, we damn well better help our bigs out. Because we didn't. We let him down. We let Jared Allen get punked on national TV because it was just him trying to make up ground to both help cover us at the point of attack and go carve out Mitchell Robinson when he had position. Like the everyone on this roster has to come with a gang rebounding mentality next year, because it's not like we were leaking out to run, Justin. like you can't have your cake and eat it too. Like you can't play slow and not gang rebound. And I really hope to see them across the board take that challenge. And of course, I'm going to spend the wing podcast talking about rebounding the whole way because it was a huge problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I completely agree. And you look at the season-long numbers, the only players on the Cavs that were above the 70th percentile in defensive rebound percentage: Jared Allen, 90th, Evan Mobley, 88th, Isaiah Mobley, who qualified apparently at 79th. And then after that, everyone's below the 70th, and a lot of the teams below the 50th, right? Like Dean Wade was the next at the 69th percentile. And obviously,
I don't even think Dean's that good of a rebounder.
Yeah, he's not great, but like he'd help, right? Like, and we had talked about that going into the Knicks series, right? We're hoping that if he was healthy enough to play, he was a guy that could be that third big, and potentially, when we're talking, doing our big man portion of the recap, talking about the kind of whether or not allocating resources to get a third big to help mitigate that issue is certainly going to be something that comes up. But let's just rifle through our grades here, Carter. I went B+ for Caris LeVert, B for Cedi, B- for Okoro. I thought he finished the year strong, but you can't overlook the start of the year. Definitely turned around post January. Lamar C+, and then Denny Green incomplete. Just can't give him a grade.
I think given the way that this season went and the way the postseason went, I did not feel comfortable giving anyone better than a B. And my grade kind of reflected that. LeVert, I gave a B. And maybe
for what you expect from Caris LeVert, because I always graded on that curve. I thought it was B+ worthy. I think if you get the Caris LeVert, especially the one we got at the end of the season, if you get that as your sixth man, and we'll talk right away about bringing him back, I'm very happy with that. I think that's a high quality. That's a luxury from a team building standpoint, assuming you can fill the hole at small forward some other way.
I think some of the fit concerns remain there for me. And then I just said I think he was perhaps the worst mid-range shooter in the league based on role and volume.
Details.
So if I believe that, I cannot give him a B+, but I thought he impressed me in all the peripheral ways I never expected to be impressed. So, I think a B is fair for him. Cedi, I also gave a B, just relative to role rotation. I mean, he wasn't even supposed to be in the rotation to start the year, and then Darius got hurt, and he found his way back in. Fought his way back in, and ended up playing, more minutes than just about anyone off the bench in the postseason. To some up and down results, but I think a B relative to his expected role. Okoro, I gave a C+. I don't think you can wipe out the fact that, and part of this, this is an ecosystem, right? It's not necessarily his choice to have gotten benched for huge stretches of postseason, but he got benched. He wasn't able to. He was not able to instill the trust in JB to keep him on the floor for big stretches of that postseason. And then obviously he just had a disaster first stretch of the year. So I think you have to account for the whole year. And even though he had a really strong middle, and I'll remember that game winner fondly forever, I still think it was a C plus relative to where I wanted to see a third year leap from our guy. And then Danny Green also incomplete. I mean, he barely got to play and clearly was on 1.5 legs when he was out there from my vantage point.
So given the fact that the Cavs do have limited resources, they have the mid-level exception, they have the biannual, some second round picks to play around with, one that they could potentially use this year. Are you down with bringing back Caris LeVert and Danny Green? I feel like LeVert you have to, just because you can't lose the asset, like just to begin with. And I think he still makes sense. Obviously, I like him as the sixth man. You down for bringing back Danny Green?
I'll address LeVert first. You have to, or you have to find a trade, like a sign and trade. Like you can't where the Cavs are just be like, well, we'll see ya. They're in a between a rock and a hard place there. So even if they were kind of ready to move on and explore something else, they're not going to be able to find an equivalent quality player, without burning their mid-level exception spot. So I think if I'm the Cavs front office, I'm trying to bring LeVert back, and I'm just trying to get him down to that 25 minutes, 20 to 25 minutes in the postseason. So on nights he doesn't have it, you aren't like, well, we just got to play him and figure it out, because that's where they were. He was just so important for this team. He was their fifth best player, I think, on balance over the regular season. So yes, I would bring him back. Danny Green, I probably would.
It depends what other options are available for vet men, but
but with vet men's, like, I think it's kind of fungible in so far as if he's back and you're in camp and he's still running really poorly and you're like, maybe we move on, but I think like the thesis of bringing in a championship level vet that might still have enough juice, I get that, and I would be certainly down to do it.
Yeah. So, talked about it earlier. Unlikely to get an S tier shooter. We'll disagree a little bit about Max Strus, but
I'm comfortable with an A tier shooter. Then
okay. We're unlikely to get a true two-way wing. Like, just looking at the options, I don't think that's something that you can really guarantee in terms of like high volume shooter that also plays defense.
Can I challenge that real quick?
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
I just feel like we have warped 3-and-D to this idea that you have to be like an A tier shooter and an A tier defender to like earn that label, or you're not a true two-way. Like I would say guys like Max Strus, guys like Grant Williams are two-way enough.
That's fair.
Like how many players qualify for like true 3-and-D if our standards are this high? It's like 5. And most of them are superstars. So I just feel like I'm pushing back on the idea that you can't get a two-way wing. Max Strus, I think two-way is.
I will push back on Max being a two-way, even though I've said I really like him. He's not a good defender. He's really, really not a good defender.
Here's what I will say. I think what two-way means is you are not so bad on either end of the floor that you cannot be played in a postseason series.
Yeah.
That is what two-way means to me. And to that end, I think the Cavs are very capable of adding a two-way wing.
Do you want to guess what percentile Max Strus is defensively per EPM?
I don't need to, because I can watch him play playoff minutes for a team that's going to the finals. So okay, I know that he can stay on the floor.
It's 6th.
I don't care. I just don't care.
Okay. So what is your biggest priority? So let's go from there to, let's say you're not able to land a high volume shooter. Would you be okay with someone that maybe takes 5 a game? Like let's say Josh Richardson, who I think there's some overlap with Caris. Like I think they both make a similar quality brisket, but they get there in different ways.
I like that.
Like, are you okay with a guy like Josh Richardson that brings some playmaking, that brings some defense, and like 5 threes a game?
I think watching that playoff series, the Cavs needed first shooting, second rebounding, and third more dudes they could that they knew were playoff quality players. That they
Okay.
knew were playoff quality players. So if that first option fails, and you're in a rock and a hard place, and it's like, okay, Strus doesn't want to come here, and like I think you just look to add good players from there. If you can't find the archetype you're looking for, you can't just be like, well, we tried, let's run it back. So I think you just try to add more good players to your roster, and then explore adding those skill sets through other avenues, whether it's trades, whether it's draft, whether it's taking a shot on a few minimum or biannual guys that like guys like, I'm not saying that they should sign this guy, because I know you're gonna hold your nose when I say it, but guys like Malik Beasley, whose value have really dropped over the course of this postseason.
I won't hold my nose at that.
Okay.
I thought you might say Dylan Brooks, which even as a Canadian, I've got some limits here, man.
But you take cracks at guys who have that skill set or have demonstrated in the past, even if maybe they have recent things that have affected their stock that make them not mid-level exception players. Because I think 2 months ago we would have said Malik Beasley is going to be a mid-level exception worthy free agent. And then his time with the Lakers went very, 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 very poorly in a high leverage situation. Couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. And all his other weaknesses are exacerbated as a result of that. So like, I think that's where you start.
That would be a skill set pick.
Yeah. If your plan A fails, which is, use your biggest chip, your mid-level, to go acquire some shooting, then you have to go start trying to chase it on the margins. And good teams have A, B, C, D plans.
That's fair. That's fair. I think we're on the same page there. It's funny how much of a prisoner of the moment I am. Like 3 months ago, I remember sitting here on this podcast being like, man, I'd love a Dylan Brooks, an agitator. I know he's not a great 3-point shooter, but just gets under people's skin. He's such a good defender. And now looking at the playoff run, I'm like, no, I can't do that. I would 100% talk myself into Dylan Brooks. Who am I kidding? But
I'll still talk.
But I don't want to have to.
I would still talk myself into him with relative ease. Maybe an offseason, a humble pie. It gets you where you need to go.
Yeah, I'm self-aware enough to.
Gotta remember, these are humans, guys. These are humans who change and grow and learn, and some don't, but some do. Talk about the Memphis Grizzlies. They built an entire era of their team on a player that everyone had decided was a selfish loser in Zach Randolph.
Mm-hmm.
So, just don't forget that humans change and are different, and so even if the Cavs end up signing a player you don't really care for, hi, Carter Rodriguez with Lowry Markkanen last year. Those guys are the masters of their own fate a lot of the time. So whatever direction they go, I think, like, we joke about being able to talk ourselves into anything, but I will try, because I want these guys to succeed. And even if I don't necessarily love whatever they end up doing, I think I'm going to look to find, every outcome, not just the ones that match my very limited perspective.
Yeah, and if you want to listen to people that don't learn from their mistakes and don't improve, you can continue to listen and support the Chase Down podcast. Big thanks to everyone that tuned in live on YouTube. Make sure you like and subscribe. Click the notification bell so you know when we're going live. If you're listening via podcast and you want to support us, leave us a rating, leave a review, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, and help cook those books. If you want to be part of our exclusive Discord chat, you can send a screenshot of the review to chasedownpod@gmail.com. However you choose to support us, we really do appreciate it. Make sure you guys are staying safe out there. Until next time, go Cavs.